Good afternoon. Happy Friday, August the 7th. We're here, Amy Vetter and Jen Wilson, to talk about leadership and things that are happening in the profession. And I'm excited to be here. I can't believe in Nebraska where I am, we're marching towards school starting this coming week. It's kind of scary and exciting to some degree to try to get back into some sort of normal swing, but sad to see the end of summer. But we've sure had a fun run so far with our Friday lunch chats, and we're really appreciating the folks that have been following and posting and commenting. So welcome, and make sure you share any ideas that you have along the way. We'll be watching social media to see if we can incorporate them. I know, Amy, you've got some thoughts from your week, and I'll start with you, just what's been going on and what's been on your mind.
Well, I think this week was kind of a interesting week for me because I had a plan this week because of my yoga studio. I needed to take some training to keep a program that we run. And it was in person. And I can't tell you how important that was. We were in masks and all the right precautions, but how important it was to be able to have that human experience back and forth. But even more importantly, it just reminded me how important it is that we take time to learn. And I think a lot of times during this, we have lost that because, we're in a learning to survive, but not a learning of space. And when I say that, sometimes when you go to learn, other ideas come or assessments of yourself because you are literally away from the day-to-day. I couldn't get to my computer this week, and it really it was the first time in a long time that I felt like me, because all of a sudden ideas started coming back in my head. And I think, like many of us, it's just been maintenance. And, how do we survive rather than making sure that we're still thinking innovatively, creatively, what can we do? And I needed that time away. And this isn't vacation. So vacation, that kind of stuff, I would put in its own category. We need that to fill our cup. But this was more of like a brain vacation because, it's still thinking, but it's getting you out of your day-to-day.
Yeah.
Your brain can release from your daily tasks and then start regenerating future-looking ideas. And it's not something you can make yourself. You can't make your brain do that. But what you can do is make sure that you're dedicating the right amount of space to learning, and just see, once you create that space for yourself, what happens from there.
Yeah. Well, and so we see this all the time because we're both in the learning and development business. We deliver workshops and things, and we know that people get in there with us and they all of a sudden start generating or having big ahas, big insights. I always tell people who say, I don't know if I have the vision to be the leader. I'm like, you won't have any vision if you stay buried in the day-to-day. If you spend all your time with your nose in your laptop or on the phone or in meetings or whatever, it's hard to have vision. You don't have vision until you start doing what we call mental boundary expanding exercises, whatever those are. I think reading is one. I try to keep up with trends via the trades, and also lots of different news publications outside of the CPA profession, like Harvard Business Review or Fast Company or those kinds of things. And just the little break that I'll take daily to read articles from those helps create some of that space. It takes me out of my sort of day-to-day and into somebody else's ideas, which can be great. But I get what you're talking about, which is a big space, not a little space, and making that big space taking days. And right now, we used to do that, before COVID, by going to a conference. That was helpful,
Right.
You
Right.
And so you go to a 3-day conference, and somewhere in there, you would get ideas and hear things, but you'd also create that rest and that opening so you could generate, how does this apply to me? What should I do next? What could I change? And we're not going to those conferences right this minute. We're not getting that. And so we've got to figure out, how else can I create it?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. I love it.
Well, and I think it's a good point that it's not necessarily one thing. It's the one thing that works for you. For me, it is when I'm learning from someone else, it actually gets me on a track or resets me where, for this year, and I think for a lot of us, I had things that I had planned to finish and get out in the world. And I stopped it all because I needed to focus on what needed to be focused on.
Yes.
And taking that space actually reminded me of those things that I put on the back burner, and my head started going to which one of those things could I add back in? Where does it make sense? And then what am I going to stop doing in order to make space for that?
Yes.
Not necessarily adding it to everything, that's on our plate. It's more what's working, what's not working, what do we need to do different moving forward so that we can then figure out where we can still make space for the things that are growth, initiatives as well that are important to our business and to us personally.
Yeah. I spent 2 days with our transformational leadership program participants via web-based workshop. So in this kind of a format for 2 days. And we did some happy hours and we did some exercise and all via Zoom. And it was, it was great to be with them. It was sad not to be in person, but man, we made the most of it. And one of the things that I experienced with those guys was, first, I would say their openness to the ideas of being a better leader and changing. Their just complete openness so they could get right in and talk about it without resistance. I did not experience resistance from this group, which is rare and amazing. But second, they really were aware of what they needed to stop, or that they needed to stop something to start these new behaviors. So when we teach middle managers, we always have to teach them that in order to go up a level, to work up a level or reach to new business development or people development or internal initiative leadership type positions, in order for them to do that or take a bigger role in a client, they have to give up something. And I do think that point you just made is so profound, because most of us just think more, more, more. And that's what creates that overwhelm. And when we meet middle managers inside firms, they're all overwhelmed. They're all completely flattened with overwhelm. Of course, the pandemic doesn't help because it adds this anxiety on top of it. But they're overwhelmed with just volume and prioritization, just naturally. And we have to teach them, if you want to clean that up, you're going to have to give things up. And that means delegating. That means saying no. That means pushing things off or down, or asking that they be eliminated. Sometimes it's firing clients. Sometimes it's stopping an initiative that really isn't succeeding or doesn't feel like it makes sense anymore. Quitting a committee that has been meeting for 25 years, but doesn't really feel effective anymore. That stop. I don't think we can emphasize that enough. What are you going to stop doing so you could start doing those things that are really right for you now?
Yeah. And making sure that there is still space for professional development, because I think it's just something that's kind of gone to the wayside right now. And everyone's just like sipping in like, oh, I got to get this CP or that CP just to make sure I make it by the end of the year, instead of really taking some time, thoughtful time of what is most important that we need to learn right now. And I would pivot that into my next thing that I wanted to talk about today, that what also really woke up for me this week was, I had set an intention at the beginning of this year, and the beginning of this year looked a lot different. And one of the things I do in my yoga classes is always set an intention before the class begins. And so that's where I've been going, is this intention word that I set at the beginning of the year. And I realize that doesn't resonate anymore.
Yes.
And just because we set an intention at the beginning of this year, things changed a lot and we changed a lot. And I started, I think, using that intention in the wrong way, where it had a point to it in the beginning. And then it was more shifted because of all the stress and things that have gone on. And so I think it's important that we get back to intention setting that we do at the beginning of the year, but then we kind of lose sight of, throughout the year. And just like a budget changes and we have to do a forecast and make updates to that through the year based on things we learn, I do think that it is now time to kind of step back and say, what's our intention for the rest of the year now that we know what we know?
Yes. I totally agree. And it's the intention in terms of like the one word that will our guiding principle or whatever. I always set 3 years at the beginning of the year, or 3 words. And my 3 words I have managed to apply to the pandemic. I mean, I wrote a blog about how I felt providential almost. My 3 words were hopeful, which it's, I've been really working on being hopeful in the middle of some of this insanity, grateful. And I've been really looking at all the positives in my life since the pandemic, even though there are negatives. I'm really grateful for those. And then flow, which was intended to be like, I'm going to go where the universe takes me. I'm going to be less worried about trying to direct it and just go. And as it turns out, that was a good idea. Intention, since I have absolutely no control over what's happened the last 20 weeks or whatever. But resetting that, stopping and saying, do those still apply? Do they work for me for the second half? And then also, we talked about this a little bit last week. We've been encouraging all of our firm leaders. We do a lot of vision planning and we do strategic planning. And we always say, what are your top 3 major initiatives or big rocks that you're going to get done this year? And so we had a lot of clients come into 2020 with clarity of their 3 big rocks or their 3 big intentions strategically. Those things may or may not apply. And they went into survival mode like you did and I did. And and so then they went into busy season, long busy season. And now they're out, and we're encouraging every one of them to stop and get that leadership team together and say, are these things still applicable? And if they are, do they need to be refined for the current environment? We know they do. We don't think anybody's strategy that they started with 1-1 is exactly the same. So, but to quit running tactically and almost scared, quit running tactically and scared and run intentionally and strategically. And, I think that's great. So have you thought of your new word? I mean, do you know what it will be?
Focus. So I, really started this year with a word of release because I was under a lot of stress personally and so forth. And I really thought about, I need to undo any preconceived notions I've always had about myself or opinions, like where did they come from? So I was really releasing myself from any way that I had actually thought about things. If I had a thought, was that my thought? Was that somebody else's thought? What do I actually think about that? That release word, when I started reviewing it this week, I'm like, it started to become like an avoidance word. Like things get bad and then I'm like, just release. And I didn't mean for it to shift that way. It just started shifting that way. And this week I'm like, no, I got to get myself back into alignment of focus, and that worked. I mean, it did help with, things that have, happened throughout the year. But I think that's also, we have to kick ourselves in our own butt sometimes. It's not always, this is from a very personal place. I think we all have to go there and say, what serves me right now. And if I have to, kick myself into gear, because we can see patterns of thought happening, right? Like all the things that have happened in the world, and then we keep repeating that. And the more that we repeat those things or those stories happen, it becomes habit. And that then becomes, what we're saying every day. And does it truly still resonate today? And is that the right thing to be talking about? And this really is more from a personal space of really assessing, what kind of energy do you want to create in your team? It all starts with us. And it's actually a good exercise to do with your team of like, let's all intention set now. Like, okay, what's done is done. We cleared the space. We know how we feel about it. We know how we feel about the outside world. What do we need to do from an intention standpoint, just as if this was your New Year's resolution, to get yourself back on track?
Yeah, I love it. And I think this is New Year's for a lot of our firms, because they're coming out of really crazy time. And, it doesn't mean the pandemic's over. We're still in that crazy time, and we're heading into an election, which will add to the insanity potentially. But from a work perspective, a lot of firms are at a midpoint or a stopping point to do that assessment, and they need to do it for sure and feel renewed out of it. It's not just another maintenance thing or another emergency crisis thing. Oh no, hurry. Let's work on the 3 strategies. We got to fix them. It's not like that. I think if we could approach it like, I've been saying it all along, this crisis is filled with opportunity. And there are all sorts of new insights and new learning, new ahas that we're getting. And how could we apply those? Like the advisory service aha, like, wow, we've been talking about advisory service like it was this thing that was really huge and hard, but wow, we found out it was just talking to our clients and figuring out what was going on with them and seeing how we could help them and then delivering that help. And so that's a big aha. What could we do with that now? What could we do with the aha that remote work works? Could we go to borderless recruiting? Could we go to borderless client reach? Could we refine and improve that by doing some technology investments and innovation right now here in this little phase before we get to January? We don't know when we're going to go back to 100% everybody in the office, if we ever will, and I don't think we will. I have had some leaders say to me, it's been discouraging this week. I've heard a couple of leaders I respect say, we can keep this remote thing up going maybe through the end of the year, but boy, by January, by spring busy season, we better all be back, and I'm like, have you written a letter to COVID-19 to make sure it's aware? You have this hard stop January 1st. I don't know. I'm thinking maybe that isn't going to.
They may need the intention word release.
Or accept, or get real. I don't know. I don't know what the intention word is, but I do think that in that instance, there's this big opportunity to sort of look at it clean and new, and maybe even with excitement.
Yeah. Well, and that's truly what learning helps you do. Like, it takes you into another space, and then you start remembering like what's good, what's good about you, what's good about your brain, where you can really make a difference. And it's important that we take that time right now, I think.
I love it. I love that. Well, so what else is happening from your perspective? Anything else that you're thinking about or worrying over?
I think those 2 things were pretty big for me this week. I've done a lot of thinking and reworking, and, I'm going to take it into the weekend, probably, of just really trying to, shift where I need to shift with things in my businesses and my life as well. But what about you?
I'm looking forward to really looking at the rest of August as, for us, kind of a really busy period. I told you at the beginning, before we started recording, that August is the new June. Our normal busy month of June turned into August. And so when this passes, I'm looking at the Labor Day weekend as kind of a reset for me. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to take a few days around that. I'm going to take everything out of my office and repaint it. And decide what
I'm going to hold you to that.
Oh no, I'm doing it. It's happening. I've already scheduled the time off. It'll happen. I promise.
Okay.
Now, guess what? It's going to be probably the same color. I have a red office, burgundy, and I really love it. But what I'm picturing is taking everything out of it and then deciding what to put back in it, and like putting less in it,
Yeah.
and then also like letting go or releasing some things that I just don't think I need anymore, or aren't valid, or maybe they're, just like, I have 2 printers in here,
Right.
probably don't need them. With the amount of print we do, probably don't need them, things like that I'm just going to sort of say goodbye to some stuff. And I'm good at that in other areas of the house. But my office, I, set it up and I have modified it here or there as we go, but it's, it needs to be renewed, I think. And so that's one of my big projects. And I will, I'll show it to you, like Cribs on MTV or something. When we're done, one of these Fridays, maybe that's what we'll do, is MTV Cribs.
There we go.
Yeah. Well, we're past time, so I'm going to cut us off since I'm the recorder this time. And I've really appreciated this opportunity to think about making space for renewal. I think it's really renewal and recommitment. And so hopefully our listeners, that resonates, and we'll all take some time to think about our intentions for the rest of the year. Thanks, Amy. I'm glad to talk to you. Bye.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah, you too.